Hello Summoners and welcome back to our ProGuides upcoming changes video. My name is Christoph and today I'll be going over all the upcoming changes that are planned for patch 9.8. Everything that's been mentioned here can be found in the PBE right now, but please keep in mind that nothing is set in stone and changes can be made before 9.8 hits. Alright, let's start with the top lane. Fiora has been doing decently well in the top lane ever since the Conqueror rework, but is looking to receive a few buffs for patch 9.8. A lot of our analysts believe that Fiora is in a good spot right now and doesn't need any big changes, but a few buffs couldn't hurt. Currently, her W has its CC duration increased from 1.5 to 2 seconds, and also its damage increased by 20 at all ranks. Next, her E blade work has its mana cost reduced to 40 at all ranks, and even had an attack speed buff which was recently reverted. If these changes go through, it shouldn't make a huge impact on Fiora's stance in the meta, and she will likely remain as an A-tier pick. I'm sure most of us remember just how oppressive and OP Camille was just a few patches ago. Even though she was very dominant in the jungle, the Steel Shadow was only a B-tier top laner at the time and received many indirect nerfs to her top lane role. In patch 9.3, Camille was gutted from the jungle, but still had a ton of nerfs that stuck onto her from previous attempts at knocking her off her god status in jungle. On the PBE right now, one of the nerfs has been reverted, and Camille will be receiving a buff to her base attack speed for patch 9.8. Although this is a small change, it actually impacts her dueling potential a lot and will make for her kit to feel a little bit more fluid. Next up is Singed. Due to the recent nerfs on Dark Seal, Singed has not been doing so well in the top lane. In order to help him out a bit, he will be receiving a few compensation buffs for the upcoming patch. On the PBE right now, he's getting his HP regen buffed, followed by a mana cost buff on his E. Lastly, his W, Mega Adhesive, will have its slow increased from 40% to 60%. These buffs are pretty big and you should expect to see Singed a lot more in your upcoming ranked games if these changes do go through. If you're ever versus a Singed in a top lane, just remember the #1 rule in League of Legends: never chase a Singed. Gnar used to be a very dominant top laner a few seasons ago, but is really struggling in the meta right now. He is unable to keep up with high damage and mobility top laners such as Riven, Fiora, and Jax, which is causing him to be a B-tier pick at best. To allow Gnar to come back into the meta, he currently has another buff on his ultimate. The cooldown for this ability is receiving a huge buff from 120-180 to 90-60-30. This is a really great change for Gnar and will allow him to trade more effectively against his counterparts. Ever since her rework, Kayle has been far too strong and remains at the top of the tier lists. Even though she went through several nerfs in the past few patches, it seems as though they weren't enough to balance her out. Currently on the PBE, there are nerfs to her base AD, armor, and attack speed. Lastly, her Divine Descent passive is now based off Kayle's level rather than her skill points. This means that getting a free skill point from Kleptomancy will no longer speed up your God Mode power spike. Ornn is another champion that used to be very dominant in the top lane but is not doing so well at the moment. Although he's been picked a few times in competitive play, he's only a C-tier pick for solo queue due to the removal of the shield on his W, Bellows Breath. For now, Ornn will receive a buff to the item upgrades that he provides with his passive. Forefire Cape, Infernal Mask, and Frozen Fist will all see stat buffs in patch 9.8, which will allow Ornn to have more impact on the game. Lastly, he did have a CC buff and damage buff on his E, Searing Charge, but this was deemed to be too strong, so it was reverted. Renekton has a solid stance in the meta right now, but is looking to see major buffs for patch 9.8. If the plan changes do go through, then we highly recommend you pick him up due to his low skill cap yet high damage potential. Firstly, his base HP will be increased by a small amount, followed by buffs to his attack speed growth and armor growth. Next up, his Q, Call of the Meek, will have its healing against champions increased from 3 times to 4 times. These changes are going to feel great for Renekton mains and will allow him to trade more effectively in top lane skirmishes. Aatrox will be receiving a mini rework on several parts of his kit. Currently, his E, Umbral Dash, will be able to store 2 charges again, and his ultimate will be getting a pretty big rework. These changes are planned for patch 9.9, so make sure you watch our upcoming changes video for next patch if you want to know more about this rework. Just before we get into the jungle, I want to mention that we have a wonderful Night Blue course on climbing the ranks as a jungler on ProGuides.com. If you guys are interested in getting into a higher division this season, please check out ProGuides.com and go check out that Night Blue course. You will not regret it. Amumu has been all alone in the jungle for far too long, but is finally getting some attention by the balanced team. His Cursed Touch passive will have its bonus damage increase from 10% to 13%, and his Bandage Toss will see buffs to its cooldown and follow mechanic. Our analysts believe that Amumu still won't be able to compete against other junglers right now due to his slow clear speed, but we'll keep a close eye on him in the next meta-analysis video. Sejuani's been looking really good in the jungle so far and has only been getting stronger since her return to the meta. Even last patch, Sejuani received an indirect buff due to the Cinderhulk bonus damage increasing on monsters and minions. Sejuani's looking to receive more buffs on the PB right now, and she will be on the brink of S-tier status if these changes do go through. Her W, Winter's Wrath, will have its initial damage increased by 0.5%, and then the secondary damage increased by 1.5%. You'll definitely feel these changes once you get into the game with her, and it'll help her dueling and jungle clear speed a lot. So if you're interested in climbing next patch, you're going to put in a lot of time, make sure to check out Sejuani. She's pretty easy to play, and she's an absolute monster team fighter. Although Trundle has been getting buffed numerous amounts of times in the previous patches, none of them were big enough to push Trundle to A tier in the jungle. In order to bring him closer to his prime, Trundle will now have his Chomp bonus damage increased by a small amount, followed by a slow increase on his E, Pillar of Ice. Our analysts do believe that this might be the change that Trundle was looking for in order to return to the meta as a counterpick to the upcoming tank junglers, such as Sejuani. However, this change could also have zero impact on him, similar to the past 3 buffs he received, and just left the Troll King in the dust again. Master Yi's been a common favorite for many low elo players, but is borderline unplayable in higher ones with the exception of the Taric funnel strat. On the PB right now, he's getting a small change to his ultimate, which will now allow him to move through units. This means no more awkward creep blocks and getting stuck in minion waves after exiting Alpha. Alright, onto the mid lane. Before we get into the mid lane, I do want to share our high mid lane mastery guide with you guys. For all you mid lane mains out there, go check out ProGuides.com and watch the high course to the mid lane. It's super valuable, and it will absolutely help you climb ranked this season. First, we have Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia has been an impressive pick in the mid, top, and bot lane for quite some time. However, her play rate has gone down significantly due to a ton of small nerfs stacking up and impacting her stance in the meta. To help bring Cassiopeia back into her former glory, she will have her Twin Fangs mana cost lowered by a small amount. We don't think this will make her OP, but we do think it is a good start. Morgana has been really strong in the mid lane ever since her rework and has a surprisingly low play rate. Although she was nerfed last patch, it seems that these nerfs were not enough, and she's looked to be nerfed again. Dark Binding will have its AP ratio lowered by 15%, followed by a 30% AP ratio nerf to her E, Black Shield. This is probably the biggest nerf for patch 9.8 and will likely gut Morgana from the mid lane. She will still be fine as a support, but will require much better reaction time for her E now that her shield is a lot smaller. Zed received a major buff recently and has had one of the highest ban rates among all ranks. In order to put Zed in check, he will have his Razor Shuriken damage reduced by 10, followed by a cooldown increase in his W, Living Shadow. These changes will definitely drop Zed into our A tier for next patch, but he'll still be a decent pickup in the mid lane. Ever since the Stormrazor rework, Jhin dropped from an S tier status down to a borderline A-B tier. A few patches ago, Jhin received a compensation buff on his Q's damage ratio, but it seems that these buffs weren't enough to keep him at a competitive level. As of now, his E, Captive Audience, will have its duration increased from 120 seconds to 180 seconds, and its rechange timer lowered during the mid to late game. Lastly, his ultimate Curtain Call will have its damage multiplier based on missing health increased from 1 to 3.5 times to 1 to 4 times. Although this won't bring Jhin back to his prime, the buffs will help, and you'll see him a lot more in your upcoming games. And finally, we have our supports. Nautilus had a ton of buffs recently, and a lot of Nautilus mains have been really satisfied with how he is right now. On the PBE, he's looking to receive even more buffs, starting with his Q, Dredge line. The damage on his Q will be increased by a significant amount, and his passive will have its CC duration increased by a small amount. Next up, items and rune changes. Bramble Vest will have its Grievous Wound duration increased from 1 to 3 seconds. Recently, there's been a lot of healing for AD carries from new items such as Wit's End, so it's only fair that there's a decent option for counterplay. Next up, we have Storm Razor. Currently, only one champion actually builds this item, which is Kai'Sa, and it's been very good on her. To allow for more diversity with Storm Razor, it will have its energized effect increased by 5%, followed by a buff to its slow effect. Lastly, Coup de Grace will have its damage increased by 1%, but will no longer grant adaptive damage on takedowns. That's it for our upcoming changes video for patch 9.8. Let us know which change you're most excited about down below. And if you enjoyed watching this video, then please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to our channel to be notified for the next one. Also, make sure to check out ProGuides.com using the link below if you want to see huge improvements to your rank. Thank you guys for watching, good luck in your next games, and we'll see you on the Rift.